Hello, everybody. My name is Clementas. We will wait a few moments for other viewers to log in, and then we will start. So, hello, everybody. My name is Clementas, and welcome to the American LNG Forum online series. I will be your host of this online conference. Our team is happy to be able to organize an online gathering under these very unusual circumstances. And at the same time, we know that soon it will be possible to meet with our speakers, delegates, and sponsors in real life. We were very glad to receive so much interest from speakers all around the globe, just like in our real life events. You will hear a variety of presentations. Some will tackle the pandemic impacts and even opportunities for the LNG industry. Others will focus on latest technologies in different LNG segments, and we will also hear some updates on ongoing LNG projects. Before I hand over to our first speaker, a few practical comments about the format of the event and the platform we are using today. I will not provide bios of speakers, but instead will ask speakers to present their organizations and their activities themselves. After each speech, I will read the questions, which you can ask on the Q&A section out loud. All viewers will be on mute throughout the entire event. If you take a quick look on the screen on the right side, there are several chat sections and options I would like to draw your attention to. If you click on chat, you will see a button called Public. Here, you're welcome to post all general comments and questions about the event. The next section besides chat is called Q&A, and I invite you to type your questions for each presentation there. There you will be able to vote for questions which you like best. I will be monitoring all chat windows and we will try to react in real time. I believe that is all from my side for now. And with no further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker of the day, Mr. Tayo Idowu, Energy Analyst, Midstream Downstream, the Energy Industries Council. He will be speaking on the topic, LNG liquefaction and regasification project update. Mr. Tayo, welcome you to turn on your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
The floor is yours.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Yes, so my name is Tayo Idowu, as mentioned earlier, and I'm the midstream and downstream analyst at the Energy Industries Council based in London. So my presentation will be focusing on liquefaction and regasification, where I'll also be giving project updates as well. So starting with the current state of play. So there was already an oversupply of LNG in the market. This is due to a mild winter and also the fact that, there was the US-China trade war as well, which was also having some impact on the demand and in terms of like the trading of cargoes. However, the coronavirus pandemic has since impacted demand even further. This is following a slowdown in economic activity. The LNG cargoes have increased in the spot market as storage capacity is full and also the prices are lower. We've also heard news about cargo cancellations from the US as well. We've observed delays to LNG projects, which also means FIDs being pushed back, and this is due to financial uncertainty from the investors. However, there is still some contractor activity, such as in the Coral South FLNG project in Mozambique, where Technip is now in the market for a range of support services. And they've also mentioned that shortlisted companies are now expected to submit bids by mid-August. So yeah, so looking at the LNG liquefaction capacity, so at the moment, the global LNG capacity is estimated around 450 million tons per annum. And this is with recent additions in Cameron LNG Train 2, Freeport Train 2, and Train 3 as well, which added a combined 14 million tons per annum. The other plants where we're expected to start up this year include Petronas's second FLNG unit, which has actually arrived on site in Malaysia. Last year in 2019, we had about 26 million tons per annum capacity added. These were from projects such as the Corpus Christi Train 1 and 2, Cameron Train 1, Prelude FLNG as well, and also in Freeport Train 1. So moving on to the LNG regasification. So currently at the moment, this is estimated at around 850 million tons per annum, where about 19 million tons per annum was added in 2019. This is from projects such as the Ennore LNG in India, which had a capacity of 5 million tons per annum. Others include the Dahej terminal in India and the Tornio in Finland. For this year, so far we've had additions from projects such as the Sergipe terminal from Brazil, which is an FSRU supplying power plants. Also in the Bahrain LNG terminal, that started in February this year and has a capacity of 7 million tons per annum. So here, yeah, so just looking at the final investment decisions here, the FIDs. So this graph here was generated using the EIC data stream, and it shows the expected FIDs for liquefaction projects, with North America, as you can see there, of course, having the highest amounts for projects expected to reach FID. Sorry. FIDs are also getting pushed back, and it is likely that some of these projects could get cancelled due to the current state of the market. I'll talk about some of the projects I've listed on this table and just sort of talking a little bit about their FID status. So the Rovuma LNG project in Mozambique by Exxon. So this is a liquefaction project with a total capacity of around 16.4 million tons per annum. And it's had its FID pushed back to 2021 on that one. This was to allow the impact of the coronavirus pandemic to play out. And of course, it also gives the company some time to address financial issues. Next would be, so for the Pluto LNG Train 2. So Woodside announced in March 2020 this year that it will push back the sanctioning of this project to 2021 as well. And this is also part of the fact that it is looking to cut capex in 2020 by about 50%. For the Port Arthur LNG project by Sempra, so again, similar story here, where the FID decision has also been pushed back to 2021, given the current market dynamics. However, it's not all negative news on the FID side. For example, we've heard the iNova are looking to secure a government permit before the end of this year and targeting the FID after. So that would be for the Energía Costa Azul project in Mexico. So here I've just selected, a few projects which I'll discuss in terms of the projects that are still in the early stages pre-EPC. So starting with the Alaska LNG liquefaction project. So this is a 3-train liquefaction plant with a capacity of around 20 million tons per annum. This project was granted authorization by the FERC to site, construct, and of course also operate the plant. It was recently announced, that there's been some cost reductions. This was announced by Alaska Gas Line Development Corporation, estimating that the total project cost, of course, this also includes the pipeline and gas treatment project separately, has been reduced to about $38.7 billion for the total project cost. And these reductions are from technology and process improvements, including modular construction techniques, which will be used as well. Another one is the Delphin Deepwater FLNG. So on this project, it has an initial capacity of around 8 million tons per annum, which could be further expanded to around 13 million tons per annum. It's already been pushed, the FID has already been pushed from 2019 to this year. And actually in January, it was announced that, the FID is expected at the end of 2020. Recently, the FERC also granted this project a second-year extension until September 2021 to begin construction. The FEED contract for this project for the FLNG vessel was awarded to a joint venture of Samsung Heavy Industries and Black & Veatch as well. For the Maputo LNG terminal, so this is an import terminal where Total and Gigajoule have signed a joint agreement last year, and it's planned that the initial capacity would be around 2 million tons per annum. This also includes a 5-kilometer pipeline that will be connected to the South African gas network. And Gigajoule have also announced that under the agreement, they'll be spending around $7 million to complete the engineering and environmental studies, which will then be required for the FID eventually. Recently, the company also said, they're going ahead with building the terminal. And this is mainly to ensure that the depleted gas in the area can be replaced and supplied to industries and power stations in the southern region. So it is expected that construction will begin sometime next year. And then, so this is for the projects that are already at EPC, so they've progressed further. So starting with the Driftwood LNG project, so it's been announced on that project that, of course, the MOU between Tellurian and Petronet had expired, which led questions over the project status. However, recently, Petronet and Tellurian renewed a deal to give both parties time to finalize like an investment for this project. And they have now, until December to secure some funding in order to ensure the project is able to move forward. So we'll see what happens there. Next, so for the Greater Tortue project, this has a capacity of around 2.5 million tons per annum. And BP actually notified Gola in terms of the fact that it wouldn't be able to receive the FLNG in 2022 as it was originally planned. And there'll be around a year delay required for that project. So Gola are currently in talks with BP to defer the capex on that project, and it will then have a possible start date of 2023 instead. Next is the Wilhelmshaven LNG import terminal in Germany. So this is an FSRU and is one of the projects. Of course, there's also the Hamburg LNG terminal under development in Germany as well. So this one would have a capacity of around 7.3 million tons per annum. And in May, it was announced that, of course, Mitsui OSK Lines, they signed a contract to build and charter the LNG terminal ship. And that would be done in a shipyard which belongs to Daewoo Shipbuilding. And then following on from that, in June, it was announced that GTT received an order for the design of the FSRU. So this is planned to be delivered by 2023. And then another one I'll just talk about would be the Vasilicus FSRU. So this has a capacity of 1 BCM per annum. And it was announced that, the EPC was awarded to a Chinese-led consortium and is actually worth around $320 million on that one. And then this month, it was announced that a groundbreaking ceremony took place for the vessel. and it also opened a tender for the supply of LNG. And it was then mentioned that it's received expressions of interest from various international companies on that one. And yeah, that would be me done. I'm able to cover everything.
Thank you very much, Tayo, for this amazing presentation and for the overview of the upcoming and ongoing LNG projects. As of this point, I cannot see any questions for you, but if you will stay logged into this event,
yeah, no worries.
viewers can contact you directly in the private section.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you very much once again for your presentation.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Paul Sullivan. He's the Senior Vice President, Global LNG and FLNG at Worley. And he will be speaking on the topic OR and TSAs for independent LNG producers. Hello, Paul. Could you please turn on your microphone and your camera, please? Hello, Paul. Once again, please turn on your microphone and your camera. It should be on the top right corner of your screen.
Clem, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly, and we can see you as well. Good to see you again.
This is wonderful. This is wonderful. I would like to say that I'm wearing a very colorful shirt, Clem, from the point of view of good weather here in Texas. But actually, the heavens have just opened and we have rain. And so anyway, we'll keep the flowers nice.
Yes, the floor is yours, Paul.
Thank you very much indeed. And good morning to those of you here in the US, and for those of you in Europe, good afternoon. And now that you've had the weather forecast for me, I can probably proceed with the discussion which I had promoted here. So as Tayo was talking about new projects and FIDs, I'm actually looking at what happens after the projects are completed or towards the end of the completion of projects, commissioning stage. So where we are with that is the sort of topic here is operational readiness and a TSA, which is basically a service agreement, but it's concentrated on independent LNG producers. You probably saw from Tayo's discussion there, many of these large liquefaction plants tend to be backed by major international oil companies or national oil companies who have detailed experience in their past. But what I'm going to talk about is the new breed of developers, particularly here in the US, who were not previously involved in the industry and require, if you like, say, the services of companies which can aid them in the operation and the operation essentially of their projects. So anyway, let's kick off here. I'm not sure, do I move the slides, Clem, or does somebody else do it? I have it. Anyway, there we go. Worley is a very large engineering company after the incorporation of Jacobs ECR last year. And the reason why I mentioned that is the fact that Jacobs ECR acquisition has opened up many further doors in North America and in relation to the future operation of plants. Anyway, that's Worley. We're there with around about 55,000 people globally, although some will be on furlough at the present time, as you can imagine. And that's the reason why folks like myself are speaking from home. And that's I think what will be impacting many of you who are listening. This is my global LNG team, and you don't have to look at the specifics of it. As I say, these presentations will be available to you afterwards, and you can pore over them at your leisure. But suffice to say that our primary sort of areas of operation here in North America are Houston, a traditional home of engineering and other technical capabilities, and Vancouver for the BC and Alberta oil and gas markets, and in BC particularly the LNG market. But across the world, there are several others which provide me with the backup and support that we need for our clients. This is where we are, project development. We're over in the green space, which is essentially operations. So that would be the operations and maintenance and various other aspects of the ongoing requirements of clients as their projects move from the EPC phase, complete with warranty, into the operating phase. And here we are. The USA has made an astonishing change to the LNG liquefaction market. That, suffice to say that as a person who's been in this business from my times with British Gas in years gone by, and with Wesso, a contractor in the UK, and Worley, the last 30 years have just seen an upturn and turnaround in the total business model for these projects. When I was building my first LNG plant in Trinidad, Atlantic LNG, we were in a very different world, and certainly a much lower supply world. I think we were moving from 40 million tons a year, and we were adding 3 to that, which was a big, big project at the time. Now we're up at probably the capabilities at the moment are in the sort of 400 million odd range. I think 385 million tons last year in 2019 of produced LNG. So completely different market. The way I view it is about every 10 years, the market doubles, or the production doubles. And so therefore, as you can imagine, that creates a major sort of call on resources and the available resources for operations, maintenance, and white-collar work. So engineering for debottlenecking, for modifications and improvements. The big driver in the US is clearly the independent LNG producers. And these producers are not necessarily oil and gas companies. Some of them are, but not all. Frequently, they're investors without any previous involvement in the industry. But people who had a good business model and proposition. You look at the leading company here, Cheniere, and that was essentially set up by a group of businessmen and continues to be operated really as an advanced utility operation. What the US changed was the cradle to grave LNG business that existed before, which is where you had a 20-year or 25-year contract to buy the LNG, and then it shipped point to point, no deviations, no open market, no spot market. Spot market last year was about 30% of world production, 120 million. Thereabouts 130 million tons. This is unheard of in the days gone by, when if you had a spare cargo, maybe of 60 to 70,000 tons, that was a big issue, as to how to dispose of that. And there were rules about it. So the things that the US brought were open market tolling, destination freedom, local gas market hub and price integration. Previously, LNG had been sort of referred to an oil base, and these changed the business. So where are we here? Most of the LNG plants, as I said, were IOC or NOC backed. There were many companies which backed these. They had a very, very detailed database. They had comparative production rates. They had comparative maintenance requirements. So a lot of data backing up the operation of these plants. Now what we had were new companies. In Australia, particularly at the start, they were the ones who introduced the idea of external sort of consultants coming in. And as Worley, we provided that service to most of the projects in Australia, and continue to do so on many of them. So we have that experience and background. So as I said, we have a really good database in terms of both operations and operational efficiency and maintenance. So with that associated with our experience and background and that deep past database, we effectively become something akin to one of the IOCs, so your Shell or your BP or your Exxon, your Chevron, you know, and of course the national oil companies as well. So very, very deep experience, lots and lots of background to do benchmarking against other plants. Obviously, you can't reveal what the other plants are doing, but if you have the benchmarking, you can see where the deficiencies may well be in the modern plants. The U.S. plants were, you know, the companies who developed them, they did all the right things. They hired very, very senior people from other plants. They brought them in to set up their operation systems. But those individuals, no matter how good they were, they had previously worked in organizations which had a deep-seated engineering background, deep-seated engineering support. We're in a situation in North America where by 2025, despite COVID, you know, which might put us on the lower end in terms of new production, but what we're looking at 2025 now is what's in construction now or just about to be in construction. So they're FID approved projects. And we're in a situation where in North America, between Canada and the US, we're looking at something like 18 projects. And 15 of those will be owned and operated by non-traditional developers. The independent producers, therefore, are in a situation where they would benefit from the availability of organizations which have this experience and background. If they don't have an IOC investor in their own company, or if they can't attract one or attract their sort of services and background, they're in a situation where they're going to have to reach out to the market. Otherwise, they would be in a position where they'd have to build up a huge resource internally, which they would be using exclusively for their one plant. And that is a big increase in overhead costs for companies. So maintaining the sort of top level, the sort of management of overall maintenance, management of improvements and the like, and eventually sort of life extension potentially, managing that, having their managers, always a great deal, and very, very good managers in place in most of these companies. However, if they wanted to take on sufficient people to deal with every aspect of the future maintenance and the call-off that happens, something goes wrong, a machine goes down, we get a malfunction within the process, we get things like that. You know, who you're going to call? There's no Ghostbusters out there on our side, but as I say, there'll be companies such as ourselves which will be able to support that sort of 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So that is, where we're talking about today. What is required in relation to the application of this work within the framework of the business in the US? Well, in the US on this occasion. So the challenge. We move on. Is operational readiness. This, even though your EPC contractor building the plant will produce a project which will give the nameplate production, will do the various items like that, the build for future maintenance needs to be put in place during the construction phase. And again, there we have a detailed experience, obviously promoting Worley. In this case, we have a detailed experience of what that is. So normally with companies, they go through the commissioning startup and the warranty period, not interfering with the contractor's right to put right. But after that, there's a build-up potentially of improvements that could be carried out on the plant to improve production or improve efficiency. I think we've already sort of named the projects, but I'm going to leave you with the list. You can look at them again. The existing facilities we have on board already, all of which are independently run. We have then the new build facilities which are under construction, and we have a few of the IOCs in there. We've got Shell on Lake Charles and LNG Canada, and we have Exxon and Global Paths, or Sabine Pass, I should say. So we have them going ahead, and there's the underdevelopment, which are the ones I think we were talking about earlier with the EIC, which are projects which are potentially upcoming, potentially delayed slightly, but in essence, ones which have FERC approval, which make really good economic sense under normal circumstances, and when the market sort of returns to a little bit of balance as against this current COVID and other issue arrangement. So what's required? Domain knowledge, knowledge of LNG storage, marine infrastructure, the operational maintenance or operational readiness, as said, through maintenance build, and using the two very, very important things mentioned in all conferences now, which is digital and artificial intelligence. And these do help. Building a digital twin, doing predictive maintenance rather than just rote maintenance, on a 3-year cycle. These are important issues with regard to the economics of these plants and the maintenance of them moving forward. On top of which, having done a number of the life extension projects on Northwest Shelf in Australia, on Trinidad, my own original plant, and the like, what we find is that with the digital input, we are able to actually put together a much more formidable approach to work which might need to be carried out to extend the life for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever it might be. And just as my last slide, LNG Brownfield Consultancy and MMO experience. And I just leave it behind me there. 40% of Worley's business is in the LNG, well, not LNG, but brownfield consultancy and MMO across all of the hydrocarbon and non-hydrocarbon businesses. So it is our speciality. It is where we can provide that service. And we look forward to any questions that might arise.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your presentation. As of this point, we have 3 questions for you. They're pretty long ones, so you can see them on chat section public.
Okay,
the first question, yes, so chat and public. So the first question is from Miss Raki, and the question is, hi Paul, amazing insights shared, thanks. I understand your focus was on post-FID and what happens after the facilities are built. But since you briefly touched the business model portion, I would like to ask your candid option on what your views are on stake-based business model versus long-term fixed price business model and its impact on FID for second wave US LNG projects. Do you think it offers flexibility and ease to the Asian LNG buyers?
Right, across the board. Well done. And, what I would say is that for years and years, and as you can tell by that white beard here, I've been around for years and years. We lived in as you quite rightly point out, sort of fixed contract, rigid system of business. In order to gain FID, you had to have the backup contracts, the 20-year contracts, otherwise it wasn't bankable. But what we've hoped for in the last, say, 10, 15 years, as there was a slight liberalization of the LNG business, a change in the basis on which it was sold, a change in the basis on which destination clauses were no longer included, which is what the US did to sort of break up that traditional model somewhat. What we found is that we're heading towards a point where we are now, where we have a basic, maybe an immature commodity market for LNG, and that was what we were aiming for. I've been at conference for many years and asked the bankers and financiers, well, what will you accept as being a commoditized market? And they said, well, it could be 30%. Well, it could be 50%. Nobody really knows. It's a confidence matter. But if you look at the other side of it, we do a huge amount of work in chemicals, the likes of BASF and other companies, independent chemical companies. Nobody asks a chemical company whether they're going to have, or a petrochemical company, whether they're going to have a 20-year contract for the product. There is a product market. There's a commodity market. You're selling into that. You do the risk analysis based upon what the fluctuations might be in that market. And that's what we would hope for LNG. If we create that commoditized market, then projects will be evaluated simply on their economics. Which is the most economic process? What's the most economic operational model available? Can you keep producing on a profitable basis LNG for export? And it will be looked on more like oil and other liquid fuels, rather than as some divine and different fuel, which has to have these special markers behind it. And to be honest with you, most of the long-term contracts, which are still ongoing, I mean, there's still nearly 100 million tons, or maybe more than that now, but gradually reducing number of long-term contracts into Asia, so to Japan, to Korea, to Taiwan, locations like that. And they're very valuable contracts. And to be honest with you, they're not as bad as the users would say, because we've had the oil drop to $25 a barrel, and it's come up to maybe 38.40 again now. And it's a comparative cost there that people get their LNG on at a 6-month delay. So we're going to see low oil-based LNG prices going into Asia in September, October, November of this year. And so therefore, the long-term contracts are valuable for security of supply, and that must never be lost sight of. So whether they're long-term contracts of 20 years or they're 10-year renewables or 7-year renewables, it is important for security of supply, because no more than there's a glut of LNG at the present time, we could be in a time of shortage by 2026, 2027, if FIDs don't take place. And now that shortage, if you're open to the spot market, you're not going to be paying $3 an MMBTU, which is uneconomic. But even at an economic $6 to $7 an MMBTU, it seems to be a norm. You could be up to $12, $15 an MMBTU, and try and deal with that if you can.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, we have one question from Sheldon Toy. What has the decline in long-term contracts in favor of short-term contracts or using spot market has done to the ability of developers to secure long-term financing of projects and making affirmative FIDs?
Well, again, it just, Sheldon, it harkens back to the last question, to be quite honest. And what it means is the fact that there has to be a different basis on which financiers can establish their confidence in investment. And where I think we are at the moment is literally between the devil and the deep blue sea. There's all of this sort of panic. No, I won't say panic, but disquiet in the market that prices on the spot market are so low. But those prices on the spot market have been impacted by a warm winter and in the Northern Hemisphere, and of course COVID-19, which has reduced the requirement for LNG. But in the intermediate term now, the time in which the FID ready projects are going to move ahead, we're in a situation where we have really sort of conquered many of the high cost elements of capital investment. So CapEx has tended to move downwards. We tend to be building these plants now, by modularization and other improvements. We tend to be building them cheaper and more effectively. Naturally, it's a bigger market. There's more suppliers in the market. So we are getting down to a point where capital investment has reduced on a price per ton basis. Shipping is the same. Larger ships, more efficient ships, less costly transportation. But it's that spot market that needs to be looked at. And I think the spot market itself is still on a very immature stage. But what I would call short-term, auctions you see from some of the Indian companies, from some of the Turkish companies, those type of things will tend to spread around a greater degree of confidence in the financial community that once you have a plant, you will have business. And we only have to look at pipeline versus, China as a typical market, which can be supplied by pipeline from Central Asia, from Russia Far East, and by sea, with LNG from various countries, Australia, US, and elsewhere. And what we're looking at here is a little bit like we used to do in the old days when I worked for British Gas. There was a point somewhere in the middle of England, which was the national balancing point, and every other supply of gas to every city and town around the country depended on the transportation costs from that national balancing point to the end user. So where we have in China now is you have pipelines coming in, And what you'd be interested to look at is, where's the balancing point when the price of the pipeline gas coming from outside in Asia is equivalent to the price of LNG regasified on the coast and delivered inwards. And my feeling from what I've heard from people who are knowledgeable in these areas, it's not my line of business, is that in many cases, particularly now with prices settling in that sort of $6 to $8 in MMBTU, which is predicted by many of the major producers, in that range there, LNG can seriously compete with pipeline gas coming in from, over 3,000 kilometers away from Russia or from Central Asia. So it is a balancing point, and I think that's what will give the backing for the financiers to have more confidence in investing in the comparative economics of plants rather than the long-term contracts.
Okay, thank you. We have one question, I think, from a person that knows you, Richard Westerdale. And the question is, Paul,
Yes.
Good to see you, mate. You mentioned the impact of independent LNG producers on global market. Given COVID-19 and associated temporary demand destruction, do you see a reversal in trend back to integrate full supply chains and longer-term contracts to support projects?
I think, I'll be honest with you, Richard, I think lots of people would love to have that. It would be a wonderful thing to have, but I don't see us going back there. No, I think that, the analysis of this period, 2020, on of the market, which will be carried out by people much brighter than me, and who are paid to be sort of international analysts, will show us that it will show us what the models did to the economics of individual groups of plants. So U.S. plants will say Qatari, Australian, African, and so forth. And I think what we'll find out is that the lesson will be different for each of those plants. For the age of those plants, it'll be different. But to some extent, I don't see us going back to long-term contracts. I think that a number of opportunistic buyers will certainly get out in the market and look to sort of dangle the carrot of maybe a 10-year contract at extremely low rates. That's sort of companies who are currently in maybe a not so much a close down, but a cutback phase, may well be able to decide to take and sell some of their product at what are basically just break even or sort of wipe your face type contracts, in order to be ensured of the efficient running of their plants. But outside of that, I don't see us going back. It's not appropriate. It's not the way the world will work going forward. And to be honest with you, and just to throw on back there, Richard, I think what will be more important in terms of product cost in the future is how carbon taxes are going to affect individual producers of LNG. I'm sure somebody will be talking about that later, so I'm not going to get into that topic now, but it is a very interesting topic in relation to old plants, which are relatively inefficient, and where people are going to buy now that the market is a more open marketplace.
Okay, and one last question to you from Badrej Karatela. Is digital technology is used at full potential in existing plants? Reliability using digital technology can help plant to improve operations and profitability. However, system has to be set up much earlier in the project. How do you influence operators on this aspect?
Apologies about the phone in the background, whoever's listening, but in my office, that's what happens, and I can do nothing. I'd have to move across the floor for that. So on that one there, you're quite right. Digital has not been as effectively used as it could be. I mean, not just in LNG, but in most process plants. But we're going to deal with LNG here. LNG is, despite what people like myself who've made a great living out of it for many years would say, it's not a very complex process. It's a refrigeration process. It's physics rather than chemistry. So let's put it in the line that even though it is that, the thing that makes LNG plants expensive is an extremely expensive and not terribly commoditized supply chain. major pieces of kit for cryogenic use, which are produced by maybe 2 or 3 producers. So what you're looking at there, your point is well taken. How do we make these plants work better? And I touched upon it, but perhaps didn't give it enough attention. But we do a lot of work on operational readiness, and the operational readiness is sort of backed by a maintenance build for the future operation of the project using digital and AI. So artificial intelligence to go for predictive maintenance, to move forward on that side. And just like the IOCs, the Shells, the BPs, and so forth, the Exxons and Chevrons, we have a back catalog of many projects we've worked on, and we've worked on them from paper drawings through to whatever you want. I mean, some of these plants we've worked on are 40 years old, 50 years old, really old plants. And to be, what our recommendation normally is on life extension projects, just to bring us back to digital, is that we build a digital twin before we go back in and extend the life. And what that does is it means that where there's a lot of older equipment in the plant, and we're talking about 20 plus years old equipment, not 40-year-old equipment, but in either event, all equipment that's in there, that we sort of, we look at its life expectancy, we determine like what the corrosion levels will be, when insulation may need renewal, because insulation doesn't last forever either, particularly in these difficult climates. So all of this will be tied in beautifully by digital. However, when you're starting a new plant, you would be absolutely mad not to introduce these terms into the operational readiness element of the project preparation. And that's what all clients are advised to do. I'm sure we're not the only company that advises that, but I can tell you we certainly do.
Okay, so thank you very much, Paul, for amazing presentation and answering the questions. As always, it's really nice to see you at our events.
Thank you very much, Clem, for the opportunity to talk to the audience.
Of course, as always.
Session.
So, thank you very much. Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, I would like to welcome on stage our next presenter, Mr. Nicholas Bilbao. He is AFC ALU Product Line Director at Kelvion, and he will be speaking on the topic Diesta. So, Mr. Nicholas, could you please turn on your microphone and your video camera, please?
I think I'm here already. Do you hear me?
Hello.
Yes, do you hear me, Clem?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon for those in Europe or even in India. I know some people from India as well are attending this presentation today. My name is Nicolas Bilbao. I'm working for Kelvion. Kelvion is a 100-year-old heat exchanger provider in the oil and gas industry. Today, we want to focus on the air-fin cooler product line. Of course, we are producing a wide range of heat exchangers, but today we'll talk about air-fin cooler, focusing on how to optimize large LNG train size and reduce greenhouse gases as a consequence when working in the air-fin cooler optimization. So Paul mentioned just a few minutes back about the fact that LNG is purely a refrigeration process. So where you have refrigeration process, you need to refrigerate basically. And on this large LNG train, the most common equipment used to cool down the process is air-cooled heat exchanger or air-fin cooler. So we go through the LNG value chain to explain where we are concentrating with these air-fin coolers, the LNG train size evolution, the air-fin cooler itself, and focus on our development named Diesta, showing you a little bit about the principle, the generated added value through some study case. So we're talking about liquefaction here in the value chain, where you will have these large trains full of air-fin coolers. Of course, we also supply other equipments, other type of heat exchangers on transportation and regasification. For more information, you may log online to our K-Focus dedicated to liquefied natural gas. But today we'll focus on the LNG liquefaction train. This first slide is showing you about the tendency on large LNG trains, the size of the trains basically that moved up significantly between the 80s and nowadays, despite the new small to mid-size LNG trains, which are also coming up. We still have quite significant amount of projects either in US, in Africa, in Far East, where the trains are quite big. And so you can see on this graph, the train's capacity have moved from 2.5 million tons per annum in the mid-80s to 5.5 in average nowadays, even larger trains like those in Qatar. And where you have very large LNG trains, you need far bigger cooling capacity. So our focus today is really on the optimization of these air-fin cooler sitting on top of the LNG pipe racks, which are pretty much conditioning the size of the train. Keep pushing the wrong button, sorry. So this is what we're talking about today, air-fin cooler. So I guess most people in this room are familiar with this heat exchanger cooling media being the air, and we are using those fin tubes to cool down the process. We've been supplying those since 100 years now. The work principle is described here. And what I want to focus on here is the key parameters to define the performances on the air-fin coolers, which are related to the technology of fin tube you want to use. The power consumption is defining also the OPEX and CAPEX. The plot size resulting into the required duty that is requested to fulfill the cooling. And all those parameters are obviously conditioned by the design conditions of each job site. So now we can run a video. If you can start the video, Clem, that video will show you the basic principle of DIESTA, and then we can go further in details.
Is one of the key processes in the LNG value chain. Liquefaction plants are large and complex industrial facilities that are expensive to build and operate. With DIESTA, we can help liquefaction plants to operate more efficiently by boosting the output of existing facilities at same power consumption or reducing the footprint of newly built plants. DIESTA has been developed jointly by Technip FMC, Whelan, and Kelvion. It can be used in liquefaction plants for cooling and condensing in propane and mixed refrigerant loops. In standard air-fin coolers, a fan forces or induces ambient air through the lube bundle. The tubes contain the process medium, which is cooled by ambient air. But what makes DIESTA special? DIESTA has three key characteristics that lead up to major benefits. The tubes have a helicoidal structure on the inside, which enhances the internal tube surface. On the air side, grooves and dimples enlarge the surface areas of the aluminum fins, improving air turbulence and heat transfer. An aluminum sleeve protects the carbon steel core tube from corrosion. By placing regular tube bundles with DIESTA tubes in existing LNG trains, a colder outlet temperature of the refrigerant gas condenser can be achieved. This will increase the LNG production volume while decreasing energy consumption and greenhouse gases per produced ton. Together, these benefits will more than offset the investment in DIESTA bundles within just a few months. Using DIESTA in newly erected natural gas liquefaction facilities leads to reduced capital expenses, resulting from a smaller plant footprint and lower overall construction and procurement costs. Based on the rule of maximizing efficiency by increasing the output of decreasing the input, Diesta is the right choice for both existing and new build natural gas liquefaction plants. While increasing the output of existing plants and reducing energy consumption and greenhouse gases per produced ton of LNG, Diesta also can be used to lower the input by means of reduced capital expenses for new plant projects. This makes Diesta the heart of leading airfin cooler performance and the core of efficiency for LNG trains.
Okay, thank you, Clem. So this video was rather short. We will go a little bit more in details. If you can move to the next slide now. So we will focus on the second part of the video related to new investment projects. If there are further questions on existing, I can have separate discussions with you guys. But today the idea was really to focus on new capital projects where we can improve the footprint of the train. So as the video said, this was developed about 10 years ago with the participation of Technip FMC, Wieland, which is a tube supplier in Germany, and Kelvion in France. Where is our center of competence? For those in the US, you need to know that we have also our Catoosa, in Tulsa, in Oklahoma, we have our plant there, formerly known as Rainy Corporation. That's also part of Kelvion. And we have our sales team, of course, in Houston. So this was primarily developed for LNG activity. For your information, it's also available for some dedicated downstream processes, but we are not going to talk about those today. But again, if you need further information on the downstream, we can have separate discussions. So as it shows on the video, the development came from two separate developments. First, on one side was Kelvion, ourselves. On the top left-hand side, you can see a conventional fin tube with smooth, flat fins around the tube that we decided to focus on developing some structure on the fins, which was the so-called groovy fins development. That was back in 2008. We are now operating a 4,000 tube bundle with this technology in the world. The aim of this groovy fin was to improve the heat transfer coefficient on the air side for clean product like the LNG processes. In the meantime, Wieland and Technip developed on their own another technology for shell and tube, which was to create this structure inside tubes. Pretty much known nowadays as well, specifically in LNG, you can find those in propane chillers. And at some point of time, we just decided to talk to each other and see, well, Kelvion is improving the air side with the fin. Wieland is improving the tube side with this helicoidal structure. Why don't we move to something together and then move to both internal and external enhancement of the heat exchange? So Diesta stands for Dual Internal and External Structured Tube for Airfin Cooler. It's a long name. As you saw on the video, the idea is to improve the heat transfer coefficient on the air side through the fins and on the tube side through this helicoidal structure. This slide shows you the heat transfer coefficient improvement using Diesta fin. That shows the improvement on the air side only here. At constant fan power, we compared conventional fin tube, which could be extruded fin tube produced by all air cooler supplier. That's the curve in white color. And compared to the enhanced fin on the air side, which is the yellow curve. So you can see the improvement of the heat transfer coefficient. Improving the heat transfer coefficient means reducing the required heat exchange area. Reducing the required heat exchange area means reducing the quantity of required air cooler. Reducing air cooler means we can reduce the size of the supporting train. Now, moving more into details and some numbers, we conducted some study case. Here we took an example of an existing LNG train of 200 meters long moving to a diester, which would allow in average to gain 10%. It's very much depending on the site condition, the noise requirements, the limitation on the pressure drop on the air side. We can move from 10 to 20% the heat exchange surface. But you know, this industry is rather conservative. There are a lot of thermal parameters to be taken into account. So we took the example of 10% reduction here, and we want to focus on what it brings as global scale savings on the investor side. We're talking here of not only reducing the heat exchanger size, we're talking about the foundations, the cabling, the piping, the weight of equipment, the operating expenses, etc., which are consequently reduced if you reduce the size of the train by reducing the size of the heat exchangers. Here we took the example. So on the left side, you have these two vertical charts with the reference being the 100 on the left-hand side, split into engineering, procurement, and construction cost of an LNG train. And we tried to evaluate how much savings we could generate by reducing this LNG train by 10% inside. So we have on the left, on the right side, the consequence of reducing by 10% with the recalculated cost of procurement and construction. And this leads to a 7% global saving on the LNG train cost if we can reduce by 10% the air cooler, considering the air cooler would condition the length of the train, of course. Going to more detailed number, for example, for an air cooler commodity cost on an LNG train that could cost $10 million, we have an example of a train, corresponding train would cost 125. If I reduce by 7%, I can generate $8.75 million savings, global scale savings, which represent 87% of the initial air cooler commodity cost. So that is the kind of global scale study we need to conduct. You may challenge the train cost of 125. This is an example. Of course, depending from project to project, we will know that between stick-built, modular concept, whether it is in US, whether it is in low-cost country, pre-assembled, the cost is not the same of the train. However, what we are trying to show you here is that we are talking of a percentage of initial air cooler cost, which is 2-digit percentage. It's a huge global saving you can generate versus the original air cooler commodity cost. So if you have any example you want to submit later on your project, please feel free to call us, and we are willing to do this kind of study with you. So not only we focus on CapEx, but the other consequence of reducing the overall cost and overall plot of the air cooler is simply reducing the power consumption. So here on the right side, you have a graph. I did not leave the names of the project as I cannot disclose, but there are A, B, C to M projects that have been sized according to Diesta. You see that the projects are not showing the same optimization. This is the parameters I mentioned before. From place to place, the parameters are very different. The allowances from the end users on what is authorized and not in thermal design are very different. But you see in average that we can reduce by 8% the power consumption. So here I took an example of an African LNG project where the base design using conventional air-cooled heat exchanger would lead to 18 megawatt power consumption a year. Without Diesta, we can reduce this to 16.5 megawatt consumption a year, which would make a 35 megawatt saving in the 20 years OPEX operations. Same way, we considered again all those jobs. So I rename, you will notice I rename all the jobs USA LNG, Canadian LNG, African LNG. So here this table is showing you the interest of the technology we are selling versus the cost of the air cooler. The red dot is the benchmark using conventional technology. You see the groovy fin in green and is showing you a lower cost of the air cooler with a slight smaller train length. The groovy fin again is only the air side improvement. And the DIESTA on the left-hand side shows you the best result in train length optimization, but slightly more expensive in average, as of course DIESTA requires a little bit more operation from a manufacturing point of view than other fin tube technology. Now, if I take the same graph and I add the optimization we just mentioned about before, about the global scale savings, DIESTA becomes the most interesting. So on the left side now we have the AFC commodity cost plus the full train cost versus the train lengths. And then you see that DIESTA becomes the most effective product to optimize the global scale costing. So the challenge for us as air cooler vendor is always to be in a position to challenge the project at the right time, which means front-end engineering, convince the end user, and speak to, I would say, global procurement people. If we speak to a commodity buyer, this global scale analysis is always a challenge to convince. But time to time it works. We have projects ongoing. I mean, we have projects under, I would say, estimation in US market, which are considering right now DIESTA solution. Conclusion. So as a summary, DIESTA brings interest on capital expenditure and operating expenditure. Here we took the example of 10% less plot AFC. We can generate 8% in average in power consumption reduction and reduce the capital investment of the LNG train. All those parameters, of course, leads to less CO2 emissions in production. We produce less quantity in delivery, in construction, and in plant operations. That is it. Clem.
Thank you very much, Nicolas, for your great presentation. I can tell that every big energy company is concerned on reducing cost and saving money. So you can help them with this point. And the fact that you can receive return of investment in just a few months is truly amazing. We have a few questions for you. We have one from Sheldon Toy. Is there a set point where the marginal cost economics optimization points serves as a ceiling for the capacity size of the liquefaction project?
I'm not sure to understand what he means. Sorry.
You can read the question as well. It's in chat public section, the last one from Sheldon. Is there a set point where the marginal cost economics optimization points serves as ceiling for the capacity size of liquefaction project?
Sorry, I have difficulty to understand the sense of the question.
So perhaps Sheldon can write it again or contact you in a private section if he has more questions. We have another one. Nicolas, just curious if DIESTA can be used in cold places, especially sub-zero temperature.
Yes, it can. Actually, we are supplying DIESTA right now on the Arctic LNG 2 in Russia. Yeah, there is no limitation. It's the limitation of DIESTA is the same as the conventional fin tubes.
Okay, so thank you very much for the answer. Sheldon, if you can ask Nicolas the question that you want to ask him in private, I'm sure that he will answer you gladly. Thank you once more, Nicolas.
For that. My English time is limited.
Yes. So, can you see the question? Okay. So right now, thank you very much once again, Nicolas, for presentation. And right now we will have one pre-recorded presentation from Freeport LNG. Mr. Taylor Alberg, he is Vice President for Projects at Freeport LNG. And the presentation name is Reducing Project Risks Coming Out of This Multi-Phased Downturn. And Mr. Taylor will be joining in later if somebody has some questions for him.
Dahlberg, and I'm the Vice President of Projects here at Freeport LNG. I'm currently at our plant site on Quintana Island, just south of Freeport, which is due south of Houston. Very pleased to be here today because it's a plant site. It's no longer a construction site or a project site. It's a proven plant, fully capable of liquefying over 2 billion standard cubic feet of natural gas per day for export to anywhere in the world. After 7 years, this is a nice achievement. It's really quite pleasant to be here these days. The fight's over. It's time to sit back and enjoy the production side of the business. I'd like to talk to you today about reducing project risk for these first projects that we will be executing as we come out of this downturn we find ourselves in. I'd like to emphasize using efficiency and quality performance over time, both as market differentiators for contractors and as a selection criteria by owners. Now, first of all, let's put today's market conditions in context. How does this one stack up compared to history? This is the long history of oil prices. This looks at the price of oil at the end of the year, dating back to the mid-1860s, which is the age of kerosene in the American Civil War. You can see the peaks and valleys seem to be more concentrated on the left-hand and right-hand side of the screen or the slide. Periods of relative stability in between, but stability is something that we just haven't seen over the last several years. You look at the annotations and you see the causes of these instabilities. They're all external factors. You have 9 citations concerning wars. There's also price competitions in there, price wars, which are wars between commercial competitors these days. The fight's over. It's time to sit back and enjoy the production side of the business. I'd like to talk to you today about reducing project risk for these first projects that we will be executing as we come out of this multifaceted downturn we find ourselves in. I'd like to emphasize using efficiency and quality performance over time, both as market differentiators for contractors and as a selection criteria by owners. Now, first of all, let's put today's market conditions in context. How does this one stack up compared to history? This is the long history of oil prices. This looks at the price of oil at the end of the year, dating back to the mid-1860s, which is the age of kerosene in the American Civil War. You can see the peaks and valleys seem to be more concentrated on the left-hand and right-hand side of the screen or the slide. Periods of relative stability in between, but stability is something that we just haven't seen over the last several years. You look at the annotations and you see the causes of these instabilities. They're all external factors. You have 9 citations concerning wars. There's also price competitions in there, price wars, which are wars between commercial competitors, just war by other means. There's even a pandemic in here, the cholera epidemic in Azerbaijan at the turn of the 19th century. There's everything that we're going through right now on this chart. Just it seems that the impact of these external factors seems to be exacerbated. The peaks and valleys are higher and lower and much closer together than it seems that they were in the past years. Now let's take a look at where we stand since the start of my career, which I would call the modern era. We have the same triggers. We've had wars, we've had recessions, as shown by the gray lines. It's just that the impact seemed to be much greater than it was in that period between the late 40s and the mid 70s. Relative price stability coming out of World War II. But since then, you can see it's just been nothing but change. That's the constant in our industry, change. Same triggers, greater impacts over the course of my career. It hadn't all been bad. There's been some productivity enhancements since the mid-70s. We've had the advent of commodity trading platforms, and these are designed to improve the efficiency in the utilization of capital. Some would advocate that perhaps these are one of the causes of the level of rate of change that we see, the peaks and valleys and how extreme they are versus the way things were before these markets were developed. Fax machines, which are now obsolete. I remember rejecting the first purchase request for a fax machine because I just didn't think it was necessary. Now they've come and gone. I remember the first copier as well, cell phones, calculators, and computers. If they're not on everyone's desk, they're in everyone's hands. We've had 2D and 3D CAD and 3D seismic for the geophysical types. We've had computerized engineering calcs in all disciplines. I sometimes wonder how many people can still do a calculation because they just turn on the appropriate program and plug in the inputs and spit out the answer. Had a massive increase in lifting capacity from 300 tons to 5,000 tons. I remember I was working here on a refinery project in Freeport back in the mid-'70s, second half of the '70s, and the biggest crane in the United States at that time was 300 tons. That was its lifting capacity. In the meantime, I've used cranes with lifting capacities of 5,000 tons since then. Automatic welding has become also widespread, as have low-cost engineering centers throughout Asia and Central Europe. Modules, both onshore and offshore, the ones offshore go in progressively deeper waters, and in both cases, they just get bigger and bigger every year. We've also had the growth in open shop contracting. Improving sophisticated third country national labor forces as well has been a dramatic increase in the way we execute projects, dramatic change in the way we execute projects. I don't have fracking down here because I'm not sure everybody considers that to be a productivity enhancement, but it is definitely something that changed the industry. Now, over this period of time, when we've had improvement internally and we've had all these external factors hitting us seemingly annually, what has consistently improved over that same period of time? And it's very easy to point to a successful thing in management of the way we do business, and that's our safety performance. I remember when the first safety manual came out. I was a construction engineer in West Texas, and the first manuals were issued on the job site. It was my job to train guys in the use of the manual and educate them in the use of the manual and train them in the procedures there. I had to buy the appropriate equipment to comply with the requirements. It took about 10 years to get everybody's attention on this, but from the mid-'80s, we got away from that 16 events per 200,000 man hours down to where we stand now at 4. That's a dramatic improvement and something that is very, very difficult to improve annually because it occurs at the riskiest point in project execution, and that's at the construction workforce front, the face of the mine, as my friends from various parts of the UK or east of the US would say. They're at the mine phase. That's where the most risk has occurred, is in the construction phase. And there has been a dramatic improvement in this over the years. And it's been, with the exception of a couple of blips, an inexorable decline. Year on year, we work at it harder and we get better at it, and we've got the numbers to prove it. Total cases, lost workday cases, days away from home, number of lost work events, things like that. All of those have consistently gotten better over time. Now, why is it that that aspect of the business has consistently improved? And is this a model that we can follow as we address our concerns about efficiency and quality? First of all, what's enabled this performance? Well, first of all, it's government mandated. They tell us who, what, when, and how to report. Some would say that that's the only reason, or the driving force for its success is the fact that it's government mandated. I take exception to that. I think our better natures would have prevailed over time because it is implementing those things that are required to ensure worker safety and also to protect your company and the environment around you and the people around you. It's doing the right thing the right way for the right reasons is the driving force, not necessarily government mandates. Government also over time has issued guidelines for the safe execution of virtually every work process. First books were kind of thin. Subsequent books are a bit thicker because they cover more things. Everyone uses the same metric, and this is very important. You have to have a common metric used in the industry, everyone, to measure things consistently between companies over time, between projects. They use incidents per 200,000 work hours, and that's a metric used by several other countries around the world as well. It focuses on the health and safety of all employees, and that's a good thing. You do the right thing, the right way, and for the right reasons. Also reduces company cost and risk exposures. Compliance save reputations. We can all name the companies. Many times we can name the specific event, sometimes even the date that it occurred. But some of these major accidents have led to regulatory changes, legislative changes. It's changed industries. My brother's a drilling engineer out in West Texas, and he says there's a major drilling accident that happened a few years ago. And he said there was the work that we did before that and the way we did things after that. There's a couple of major accidents here onshore, fortunately here in the Houston market, that also We did things differently before, and we do things differently after those events. A lot of that is driven not only by legislation, but also changes in work practices at the corporate level. Some of these events have been so dramatic that they change the way that we do business, either because it's good business or because the government tells us to, or the insurance companies require. That's led to a cottage industry and the development of documentation and training materials, which are now widely distributed. No one has an excuse for not having a trained workforce. The documents, the videos, the personnel are all there, readily available to train your people in doing things safely, saving themselves, saving their families, and saving your company. So how's this discipline been used? First of all, safety performance is a selection criteria used by buyers, owners like me, and I wasn't always the owner. I spent the first 35 years of my business on the contractor side. And I was the vice president of project operations in two pretty good sized companies here in the Houston market before I switched over to being the company man, as we say in the oil field. Excellence is expected by owners. You got to have a good experience modifier number, and you got to have good TRIR, and these attributes need to be exhibited over time, just like the charts that I showed you initially. It can't just be a one-off good year. You've got to show to your customers that you're doing well year on year on year. Secondly, from the contractor's perspective, safety performance has been weaponized in sales. It's one of the bigger, more accurate arrows in their quiver. I've been approached surprisingly by two contractors just over the last 2 weeks, and then they're opening emails to me saying, I'd like to be your contractor. My TRIR is such and such. Our EMR is such and such. So they've weaponized it in sales. They use it consistently. By the way, on both of those entreaties, I've responded with a question, well, how are you doing on quality and how are you doing on productivity or performance? Also, it reduces the cost of a project, and that's a mutual advantage to both owner and contractor. Both parties also benefit from the good press of a safe project, and equally, both pay the societal and physical cost of accidents and incidents. In some cases, it can collapse your company. It can definitely damage your reputation for years. High-profile negative incidents also have a way of changing business environment for the entire industry. As I mentioned, some of these things lead to regulatory changes or changes in law, or changes in the way insurance companies will insure a project. So a safety performance has been such a great success. And once again, it's had to do this in light of all the negative impacts that seem to come from the outside and capitalize on the positive things that have happened within the industry. So over the past 50 years, why haven't we done the same thing consistently in productivity, quality, cost, and schedule performance? Well, let's take a look at a comparative advantage of the two systems that I'm advocating. First of all, on safety, it's government mandated. Quality, productivity, cost, and schedule, that's responding to market pressure. It's a competitive world out there. And like I said, I like to give every contractor another arrow in their quiver when they come to compete. When I was a contractor, I like to having every arrow in my quiver that I could possibly have. You need to have all that ammunition, especially here in the Houston market where your competitors and your owners live in the same neighborhood with you. Yeah, a client may be coming for a presentation with me on a Wednesday, but kind of sort of know who they talk to on Tuesday and who they're scheduled to see on Thursday as well. It is an exceptionally competitive market. Worked with a European engineering firm one time and asked them, where's your nearest competitor? And they said, Italy. From Dortmund to Milan, your kids aren't on the same soccer teams. You don't see each other at the grocery store. You don't see your clients in those environments either. This is a very competitive market. Competition and competitive advantage should be one of the driving forces for every contractor. Secondly, on safety, they cover all work processes. Well, you can do the same thing, and you should be doing the same thing on quality, productivity, cost, and schedule. As a matter of fact, I consistently tell people that the schedule should be the aggregation of proven work practices. You're doing it this way because it's been time proven to be the most effective way to do things. It takes this long and it occurs in this sequence. Safety focuses on worker well-being. Metrics that I'm going to be proposing today focus on corporate survival and competitive advantage. You need to thrive, not simply survive. Both will reduce cost. Both can be used as a market differentiator. Both can be used as a selection criteria. As I said, one of the advantages of the safety system is that it uses a common metric, 200,000 work hours per incidents per 200,000 work hours expended. It's more difficult to come up with a common metric expended. It's more difficult to come up with a common metric in the industry. A lot of people just look at cost, size of a project, such as at its location. But I think that you need to go a bit deeper than that in order to have a commonality, a common factor, a way to normalize the variances between projects. And I call that the complexity factor of a project. Now, fortunately, we have two guidelines in coming up with the complexity factor for projects. First of all, I worked for an employer that used a system called the equipment unit value. And I thought it was a very effective system. Took the plot plan, took the equipment list, everything on each of those documents had a point value. For example, trade towers, 25 points. Vessels less than 6 feet in diameter, 4 points. Pumps less than 100 horsepower was 2 points, and pumps greater than 500 horsepower were 8 points. Control buildings got 12 points. Major pipe racks, roads, fences, every piece of engineered equipment had a point value, and it was consistently applied across projects. And this way they could normalize the complexity for every project. You could also categorize them. Here's our biggest projects, here's our medium-sized projects, here's our small-sized projects. Also has the advantage when a client walks in the door and says, we're going to be doing this kind of project, and you say, yeah, we've done those before, not just based on dollar value or throughput, but it's based on the complexity of them. You're in our sweet spot, or we've done 3 or 4 like this to begin with. Yours is going to fall in here. And here's how well we have performed on those projects based on complexity, not location, not cost, not throughput, but complexity. It takes away the impact of changes in time. It does away with inflation, for example. Now, another document that you can use as a guideline is the Construction Industry Institute's Engineering Productivity Measurement Procedure. Now, very good document. I'll give you the source document on it in the next slide. They looked at 7 disciplines and identified 17 metrics. For example, on piping, they look at linear feet of pipe, number of fittings, number of hangers and supports. Civil, look at cubic yards of concrete, tons of steel, and the square foot of buildings. Electrical, look at linear feet of wire and cable, number of terminations, number of generators, motors, such as that. 17 metrics. Each of those have a multiplier. You take the installed quantities, which is once again an indicator of relative complexity, multiply it by the factor, and you get a point, and you get a number. You add up all the numbers, and you have the relative complexity of those projects. Now, whichever method you use, and I'd like to point out that CII's document allows for using their process, or saying you can have a company-specific custom-tailored operation, which is like the equipment unit value that I cited previously. They allow for either system. Just use either one of them consistently over time. Matter of fact, if you're new to the process, use both of them and see how the numbers compare. See which one you think performs best for your organization. Now, CII, this is a research summary number 192-1, Engineering Productivity Measurement 2, and they cite them there. Simply put, the actual discipline hours for a given project divided by the productivity basis hours, which is the quantities times the factor, sum all those up, is defined as the productivity index for that project. An organization that is improving its detailed engineering process would see this ratio decrease over time. Simply put, easy way to calculate the number consistently between projects over time, not just limited to this number, the productivity of engineering. It can be used across a wide variety of aspects of the project. I'd like to point out, neither of these is an estimating tool. CII states that 3 or 4 times in the body of their document. This is not an estimating tool. This is a way to normalize the variances between projects down to a single number, what I call the complexity factor. So how do you use this? Well, first of all, you can take labor productivity per complexity factor, home office, direct craft or indirect, the main line items. You can also bring it down to the engineering discipline level. One of the advantages of the CII process is that you can get the complexity factor or the basis hours by discipline. You can take civil engineering hours per basis hours, actual versus calculated. You can get it down to that level quite directly. Using the other method, it just gets you a gross project rating. You can also look at total project work hours, subcontract, indirect. The opportunities are quite substantial there. You can use it as a quality measure as well, because you can track the revisions or rework hours per complexity factor. You can also look at the man hours per complexity factor improvement over time as a surrogate for a quality indicator because it indicates that you're reducing your amount of rework and recycle. You do similar calculations for cost per complexity factor by discipline. You can do a comparable analysis for bulk materials and engineered equipment by prime account. Schedule duration in weeks by complexity factor is also possible. That's the project total, account, discipline, craft. You need to be careful in how you consistently define finished. That may be 95% of ISOs issued, or 95% of loop diagrams issued, or 95% of structural steel erected, or a concrete cast, such as that. Either case, be consistent in the way you implement the program. Lastly, how to use the data. Capture your past projects. You don't have to start from now. You've got a backlog of project completion reports in your library. I'd suggest you go back to the mid-90s and capture at least 2 trends since the Asian financial crisis, and see how well you were doing as an organization before the crisis, and see how well your organization were doing as you come back out, because you're different companies, you're different clients, different contractors as we come out of these cycles than we are going into them. But unlike financial disclaimers, I think that the trend lines do indicate the way a company can perform in the future if properly applied and maintained. So run these trend lines and assess the impact of external factors, such as well as the internal factors. Note on these. This is when we started using 2D CAD. This is when we started using 3D CAD. This is when we started using a low-cost engineering center. Note those things on your timeline as well. Identify the best and worst performers or years. See what went well, see what went wrong, and equally train your people on the lessons learned as to things to repeat and things to avoid. Don't think that negative projects or bad projects are an anomaly. That puts yourself in the position of putting yourself into a false sense of security. Bad projects happen almost on a regularly cyclical basis. You have to train out those attributes that led to the bad projects, just as well as you have to train in the positives that lead to successful projects. See where you were positioned now relative to the past points in your cycle. Are you really improving over time? Demonstrates to clients that you're doing better over time. Make performance a market differentiator. Now, I say you should demonstrate this to the client, but I do think that it is confidential data. It is your competitive advantage in the marketplace. I think you need to demonstrate it, but I don't think you should necessarily be required to leave it with them, especially all the supporting data. Show how it's appropriate to their project. I think that might be sufficient in the presentation. Contractors, show that you've got an improving trend line, that you're not declining. You need to be getting better, not experience one of those bad spells. So that's the end of my slides. I see that I'm just about at the end of my time as well. I don't know how we're going to handle questions on this, but I've certainly enjoyed presenting this topic today, and I hope it proves to be of benefit to those of you in the industry on either side of the negotiating table. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So thanks a lot for Taylor's presentation. Since it was a pre-recorded presentation, and right now I can see that Taylor is not connected to as a viewer, we will send all the questions that you asked for him via email, and the person that asked the question will be in carbon copy, so you could continue speaking afterwards via email. So thanks once again for Freeport LNG for joining our online American LNG Forum. Now, I would like to welcome on stage Mr. Miguel Cardenas. He is Gas Supply Chain Business Development Manager, America's Marine and Offshore at Lloyd's Register, and he will be speaking on the topic, supporting LNG terminals in the Americas. Miguel, could you please turn on your microphone and your camera? Should be on the top right corner of your screen, camera and microphone. Miguel, can you hear us? Please turn on your microphone and your camera, top right corner of your screen. We can see that Miguel is trying to reconnect again because he just disconnected. So he will be joining us real soon, and he will present. It should take 1-2 more moments. We're still waiting for Miguel. I can see that Miguel has just joined us. So Miguel, you should turn on your camera and your microphone. Should be top right corner, third button from the left.
Thank you very much, Clem, for inviting us here to the session on the American LNG Forum series. I apologize for the delay. I was connected all along, watching all the presentation from the previous presenters, and then just in time it went off on me, but we're back.
Yes, so we hear you perfectly. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. The topic that we're gonna see today is supporting LNG terminals in the Americas. And I'm Miguel Cardenas. I'm the business development manager for the gas supply chain sector for Lloyd's Register in the Americas. Lloyd's Register was established in 1760 as a marine classification society, but we have now evolved to a full provider of professional services for engineering and technology. And the main purpose of our work is to improve safety and increase performance on infrastructure projects. We have over 60,000 customers across the world, and we are recognized by over 50 accreditation bodies over the world, with a workforce of over 7,000 people. Lloyd's Register works out of 195 offices around the world. So we have presence at every location across the world. Last year, Lloyd Register donated £44 million to the Lloyd Register Foundation, which supports science and engineering research for education purposes. And the main values by which we operate are: we care about partnerships and relationships. We share our expertise always with customers, colleagues, and we do the right thing without compromising safety. That is the motto, the main motto of the company. Now, with the use of LNG increasing year over year, the LNG terminals have become a critical component of the energy landscape across the world. And the operators typically need to work around regulatory guidelines, which sometimes are changing as the project goes along, or sometimes are not very specific or non-existent at all. Environmental considerations and safety regulations, as well as productivity and maintenance and reliability requirements, are very, very relevant for operators to successfully work on a plant like this. So how does Lloyd Register help? Well, we help LNG projects succeed by managing risk, improving safety, and increasing productivity. And we do that at every stage of the project, since the start on the conceptual design stage all the way to the commissioning. Right? This is an overview of some of the multiple services that Lloyd Register provides to support LNG development. On the preliminary stages that include conceptual design, feasibility, and FEED, Lloyd Register supports the operators to increase the viability, confirm the viability of the project and obtain necessary permits. Some of the typical services at this stage include compliance assurance studies, gap analysis to make sure that the operator is cognizant and prepared to comply with all regulations, process hazard analysis, environmental studies, as well as vessel collision studies. That's also a common requirement. LNG explosion simulations as well is a requirement that sometimes comes up at these stages. And the support from Lloyd Register at this early part of the project can be critical to clear regulatory hurdles and enable a smooth progression towards a final investment decision. On the FEED stage of the project, this is where the basic engineering is done that will serve as the basis to bid the EPC contracts. And at this stage, Lloyd Register can assist with an extensive FEED study evaluation, which will ensure that to the client that all the requirements are met. And this will avoid or minimize the risk of necessary, or will reduce the risk of having changes during the execution phase, and everything will progress more smoothly. On the EPC stage, this is when typically the operator's project manager may need a specialist help and will bring on a consultant. And the consultant purpose is to ensure that the EPC contractor is carrying out the work according to the scope and according to the contract, and also in compliance with all regulatory requirements and codes. Some of the services that are typically provided at this stage are third-party design review, design verification and certification, vendor management, and also a very useful service at this stage is construction packages inspections at the fabrication yards, which can take place at any location across the world. We can also offer new construction consultancy, project management services as well at this stage. Still on the same slide, sorry for that. On the operation and maintenance phase, this is where the operator wants to ensure that everything is working smoothly, right? So the facility can operate at the required level. It is estimated that equipment failures have cost U.S. producers in the oil and gas sector around $4 billion every year, and operators that have a reliability of their plants around between 95 and 98% are able to deliver up to a 30% better performance. And on this stage, the most common or some of the most useful services include asset integrity management, also corrosion and remnant life inspection to ensure that everything is working properly, in-service inspections, as well as audits. On the last stage of the project, where the asset has reached the end of life, this is when the operator wants to ensure that all the decommissioning work is done on an efficient way and always in compliance with all regulatory and environmental requirements. Again, a common requirement at this stage are compliance assurance to make sure that the operator is working in accordance with all the regulatory requirements. Training as well is also a very, very common service at this stage. Existing facility surveys, in-service inspection, as well as design review for the decommissioning stage. Now we're going to move on to some of the projects where we have worked in recent years in the Americas. The LNG Canada project is one of the most recent endeavors in the LNG sector for Lloyd's Register. It is a contract that is going to last around 5 years. And the main challenge here for the EPC contractor was this very strict regulations for the design of this the terminal. The contract includes third-party verification, as well as support on the Canadian registration numbers and the life cycle pressure equipment safety management plan. The third-party verification, it's a service that ensures that all the individual components fabricated outside the province are built and tested in accordance to the quality assurance program. And for this purpose, Lloyd's Register is providing a verification of the quality assurance plan, and will also provide inspection of the test plans and test records. We will also verify that the quality assurance plans for the design and procurement phases are followed, and we will provide, as I mentioned, inspection tests of the test plan and the test records during construction as well. Another service that we provide on the design verification phase are going to be audit and engineering services to verify compliance of critical components such as incinerator and gas turbines. And these audits are going to be happening at the same time or in alignment with audits performed by the British Columbia Oil and Gas Commission. For the Canadian registration number support services, Lloyd's Register will follow the British Columbia alternative safety approach to demonstrate the regulation compliance for the design of pressure vessels, boilers, and fittings. We will also assist developing a complete life cycle pressure equipment management plan that will go from the early vendor selection stages to the fabrication yards, all the way to final handover to the operator. Also in Canada, in the eastern region, we have worked on Bearhead LNG and Goldboro LNG in Nova Scotia, where Lloyd's Register has been appointed as the certifying authority by the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. And with this and the work we're doing with the British Columbia Oil and Gas Commission, Lloyd Register remains the only third-party authorized provider working in Canadian LNG projects. And the work on these two projects was very similar. We provided compliance assurance to ensure that the operator is working in compliance with all existing regulations from Canada. And we also provide component studies for different specified scenarios, such as jetties, LNG storage and vaporization, and drainage systems as well. And we also provided a review of the FIT design for multiple components, such as impounding system, vapor dispersion system, and tanker grouting events. And at the end of this work, we issued the permit to construct recommendation for the Oil and Gas Commission in British, for the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board. Another interesting project in which we worked a few years ago in Argentina was the Escobar LNG terminal. And the main challenge in this case, which is very common on this type of facilities, is that there was non-existent regulations for the Canadian in the Argentinian regulation bodies. It was one of the first projects ever done in that sector. And we had Lloyd Register gas experts meet on numerous occasions with the regulators to determine what would be the best approach to work on this project. Lloyd Register provided risk assessment and also an integral certification, which encompassed the design phase, also equipment, installation, and operational procedures. For the risk assessment work, we provided a qualitative risk analysis that included identification of hazards. We established multiple scenarios for accidental releases. We modeled release consequences and estimated the likelihood of occurrence of such releases. Also identified potential off-site and on-site risks, and work on a determination for the tolerability of the calculated risks and compare those against international and also against the operator standards. The design part of the certification included multiple disciplines such as civil, piping, and fire control systems. Some of the components that we certify included the foundation piles and also corrosion control systems for the civil discipline. And on the fire control system, we certify the sprinklers and the pumps of the system as well. On the equipment certification work, we did an installation verification and operative test for the fire detection and extinguisher systems, including pumps and all the sprinklers as well. And on the certification, the components that we certified on the mooring system also included foundation piles, platforms, also mooring dolphins, hooks, and tension tensors as well. The installation work, the installation part of the certification included a verification that all the installation was done according to the approved drawings. And Lloyd Register also witnessed the installation and commissioning of multiple components, and also with witness and approved on-site functionality tests. And the last part of this certification process was pertaining to the operational procedures, where we assisted the operator to develop a complete plant operation manual. We also developed a potential contingent situation and emergency response plan, both for the plant and for the pipeline. Also, we also assisted in the creation of a operation manual for the connection and disconnection operations, and also for the discharge of gray water. And the last project that I wanted to share this time was the Corpus Christi LNG terminal, the Train 3 phase, where we provided compliance assurance services and design review. We assisted the operator, in this case, to perform a third-party review verification that was mandated by the Federal Energy and Regulatory Commission to confirm that the plant will operate under all the regulatory federal regulations and industry standards. And the design review work covered fire protection systems, as well as process equipment system and cryogenic equipment. We also evaluated the building siding analysis and spill containment system, as well as the hazard detection. And that's all I wanted to share with you, gentlemen, today. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Miguel, for your amazing presentation, and we will check if we have some questions for you. As of this point, I cannot see any questions for you, but if somebody has some questions for Miguel, they can ask you in the public section, or you can contact Miguel directly through private section. We just got one question from Harry Weber. Mr. Cardenas, what is your understanding of the prospect of FID of CC Stage 3 next year, given current market conditions?
The FID for which one? Sorry, could you repeat that?
It's CC, so I think it's Corpus Christi Stage 3.
Well, as we are saying with almost every other project, the FIDs are tending to be delayed, but that doesn't mean that the work is stopping, right? There are many stages at which we can work with the operator and developer even before the FID takes place. Engineering review, environmental studies, as well as compliance assurance studies. But every now and then we get notification that FIDs on multiple projects, especially in the Gulf of Mexico, keep delaying their final investment decision. And most of them that were originally expected for the last part of this year are jumping onto the first half of 2021. So basically, it is likely that we will see a delay of maybe 6 months or so.
Okay, understand. Thank you for that. Harry, if you have some additional questions, make sure to post them in our public section. And Miguel, you can keep an eye on the questions. Maybe there will be one for you. Okay. Thank you very much, Miguel.
Thank you.
Now, I would like to welcome on stage. We'll have a joint presentation of two speakers. So I would like to welcome on stage Dr. Larry Beaver. He is Vice President, Research and Development at RSC Biosolutions, and Mr. Scott Kopsick, Regional Sales Director, McDermott Offshore Solutions. They will be speaking on the topic, environmentally acceptable lubricants, EALs, and their use in offshore oil and gas applications.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Dr. Larry. The floor is yours.
Scott should be joining us shortly. I'll begin the introduction so we don't delay things further. A bit about our company. RSC Biosolutions is part of a larger company that began 96 years ago this month, a family-owned company that has been a leader in many fields. Originally, many areas of cleaning and lubrication. Our RSC Biosolutions division specializes in EALs, environmentally acceptable lubricants, and VGP compliant products, such as hydraulic fluids, gear oils, and greases. Our core product lines are hydraulic fluids. The Futera hydraulic fluid line is the premier product in the line. It's an HEPR type hydraulic fluid. I'll talk about that momentarily. We also have a series of gear oils, a variety of specialty fluids for everything from ROVs to saw guide oils. The ROV fluids, the wire rope lube, the gear oils, greases, and hydraulic fluids are the ones most applicable to the LNG industry. And now I'll turn it over to Scott to talk a bit about our relationship.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. And thank you, everyone, for the forum today. So I'll talk a little bit of brief history about McDermott Offshore. McDermott Offshore is part of a small division of McDermott Incorporated, which is a very large chemical company. About 40 years ago, McDermott, which at that time was under other brand names such as Marston Bentley or W. Canning, McDermott finally bought those companies, and now we're McDermott Offshore. But basically, we have water-based chemistries, water-based technologies for subsea applications. So really looking at opportunities to operate subsea valves and also have that footprint in the BOP control markets as well. So we have two known name brands, Oceanic and Pelagic in the offshore production market, and the Aerofon products in the drilling and exploration markets for BOP control systems. Now, the technology is kind of, well, it's a green technology. I like to look at it as, one of the first green technologies that was, we kind of used offshore. For one, it was non-flammable. It has excellent wear, lubrication and corrosion and micro protection. And of course, it's fit for discharge offshore, so it has to be non-toxic and a high degree of biodegradation. And of course, it has to work in all the major OEM equipment offshore. So again, we've been around since 1979 with that product. Our footprint is pretty broad. I like to think we're really anywhere that there's offshore oil and gas production and exploration. We have four major offshore facilities, or not offshore facilities, four major plants where we manufacture products. And also with that, we look at other distribution houses where we have products. So the footprint for the availability and the R&D and manufacturing of our products is a very good footprint. So, with that, we look at today we're looking at a partnership with RC Bio. And what makes sense is, we're looking at, how can we better service our constituents, our clients offshore. So we kind of looked at the synergies between the two products. One of them taking that the expertise and what they have in environmental acceptable lubricants on the marine side, and taking our history with offshore and subsea and kind of merging those two together. What this allows us also to look at is, the products themselves. Again, looking at a greener space, we both have products that are really have low impact to the environment. They are very high performance products, so they work well with critical path components. And what we can enable them to do also is to look at the footprint where we are in the offshore oil and gas market and have the availability of their products for the market. So kind of looking at it in a retrospect is that we want to look at a one-stop opportunity for our clients to be able to have products on the subsea side as well as the top side applications. Which leads us really kind of into, why are we here today? Well, we want to look at opportunities in the LNG market, and we want to look at, because we look at the LNG market as a green technology. It's a clean burning fuel. It's more widely available now. And, with all of the sustainability initiatives that we're seeing in the industry today, we want to find out, low carbon emissions. We have these alternative fuels, wind and hydrogen fuels coming on board. But we want to kind of look at where the EALs can fit in that sustainability initiative for our product line. And that is where I'm going to hand it off to Larry for him to go ahead and tell you a little bit about the products themselves.
Thanks, Scott. It is risky. We're in the business of reducing risk to our customers. The metrics have changed. Anyone who's seen information in the news about the oil slicks surrounding cruise ships with cell phone cameras now, it doesn't take long for bad public relations over even a minor spill to wreak havoc for business. So our risk reduction does not involve compromise. We produce products, and McDermott produces products that do not compromise performance while actually reducing environmental risk. Scott, alluded to the partnership between us. This really is a sweet spot for both of us. Our only reason for existing at RSC Bio is for environmentally acceptable lubricants and VGP compliant products, such as our gear oils, greases, and hydraulic fluid. We're not this isn't a bolt-on to a mega company. This is our reason for being here. This is all that RSC Biosolutions does. We have a whole list of potential applications for our products: stern tubes, crane hydraulics, davits, propellers, wire rope grease, gear oils and pump systems, thruster hydraulics, subsea control fluids, winch and wire rope hydraulics and greases, ROV launch and recovery system hydraulics, ring main hydraulics, and deck crane hydraulics. So we are prepared to supply VGP compliant, environmentally acceptable lubricants in each of these arenas for your offshore applications. The strategy is it's not just choosing the right lubricant is part of the bigger mission. You want to reduce your total cost of ownership. You want to standardize globally, not buy this hydraulic from this supplier, this gear oil from another, this grease from a third. Ultimately, you want to increase uptime and build and protect your own brands, protect your public relations, and ultimately create a safe and more livable world, both by the product that you produce and the methods by which you produce it. So what is an EAL? You've heard us use the term, and it's an environmentally acceptable lubricant. Up until about 2015, there wasn't a really crystal clear definition. 2013, 2015 timeframe, the VGP was put into place. That's the Vessel General Permit that deals with vessels over 79 feet in length. And the EPA has set a fairly reasonable definition for what constitutes an EAL. It has to be readily biodegradable, meaning under EPA definition, greater than 60% biodegradability in 28 days. Has to be minimally toxic. And once again, there are a set of criteria within the VGP defining what that means. And it can't be bioaccumulative, which means it can't build up in the biosphere. It can't build up in the organisms. So we also consider renewability or the bio-based carbon content, as well as non-sheening characteristics, to be beneficial for our customers. So that kind of gives a groundwork to talk about what makes an EAL. And there's more than one type of EAL. The ISO standard recognizes 4 types of base oil, or 4 types of EALs based on their base oil composition. And I'm going to preface these comments about the different types of EALs by stating that these are general classifications, there are, I guess you would say, good and bad versions of each one of these, but I can talk about each of the base oil types and give you some guidelines as to which are the most suited for the LNG environment. The 4 types commonly found in the marketplace are known, these are known by acronyms. The HE in each of these 4 stands for hydraulic fluid environmental. There's the triglyceride, the HETG, the HEPG, which is a polyalkylene glycol, often called a PAG. There are the HEES, which are synthetic esters. And then the last category is the HEPR, which is polyalpha olefin and other synthetic hydrocarbons. These 4 types of base oils are used in these 4 types of hydraulic fluid. This also crosses lines into gear oil and grease technologies as well. So there are readily biodegradable hydrocarbons used in greases in our lineup, and there are triglycerides used in greases in competing products. So you'll find, in general, triglycerides, synthetic esters, and the PAO type hydrocarbons used for all 3 categories: gear oils, greases, and hydraulic fluids in one form or another. And how they differ in characteristics, the oxidation resistance of a fluid is basically a measure of its lifetime when exposed to oxygen. The water resistance deals with a product's ability to both separate water and be unaffected by water. Lubricity is fairly straightforward. It's the ability to lubricate surfaces, shown by things such as low wear and low friction. And then seal compatibility is important as well, because that gives you a feel for what kind of equipment you can put in, or whether or not you can change to an EAL without making dramatic changes. And as you can see, there are advantages and disadvantages to some of these systems. The triglycerides are the least expensive, but they also have the poorest water resistance, and they aren't very oxidatively stable. So they are often used in things like ROVs, where the fluid is changed out frequently. Polyalkylene glycols can be very problematic because they aren't particularly miscible with other fluids, so you can't change them out very well with another kind of EAL. They don't typically have very good oxidation resistance, and they don't do well with a wide variety of seal types. The synthetic esters, also known as saturated esters, do quite well with lubricity. There are some seal issues with synthetic esters. They do tend to be hydrophilic or water-loving, so they don't always separate water very well, and they can be susceptible to hydrolysis and to oxidation. The category, the HEPR category, is the one that offers the characteristics most in common with the mineral oils that you want to replace in your system with EALs. Typically, the HEPR fluids, gear oils and greases, are the only category that can be considered drop-ins for existing mineral oil products. So how confident are we in this kind of HEPR technology? We've got more than 60,000 hours in the field. So this isn't just a lab exercise on our part. More than 60,000 hours in 6 years in closely monitored production vessels, in drill ships and positioning thrusters and hydraulic power units and in cranes. 10 years in the marine polar fleet in propulsion systems, in stern tube applications. And we already have multiple global OEM partners such as Transocean, Oceaneering, Diamond Offshore. So we have a lengthy field experience of more than 10 years with this technology to show that it is indeed a drop-in with mineral oil technology, and can easily replace, allows you to easily replace existing mineral oil, gear oils, greases, and hydraulic fluids with an EAL with very little changeover issues, if any. This is an example of more than 6 years in a stern tube with virtually no change in viscosity, staying well within limits for an ISO 68 fluid. Now our job is protecting environments. All our EALs are designed to be biodegradable, minimal aquatic toxicity, no bioaccumulation, no sheen when spilled on the water. We also drive towards higher renewable content as new base oil technologies come forward, and our cleaners are neutral pH. And this goes across the line. Our Futera hydraulic fluids, our Envirologic high performance hydraulic fluids, our Envirologic gear oils, and our Envirologic greases are all built with these 5 key characteristics in mind: the biodegradability, the minimal aquatic tox, no bioaccumulation, no sheen, and as high renewable content as we can put into the products. And we have eco-label certification for Futera. Our triglyceride formula is bio-preferred, and all these products are VGP compliant. We offer superior technology that offers long-term value. You remember when I started, I talked about the goals, if you will, the strategy moving forward. Our products offer less lubricant consumption for longer change-out intervals. They reduce maintenance cost due to the longer maintenance intervals, and spills are treated more leniently when you have an issue with an EAL. It increases your uptime. They work with standard NBR seals, so you don't have to go in and replace your NBR seals with expensive FKM fluoroelastomer seals. They have excellent lubricating characteristics. And of course, your brand is important. There's less PR risk associated with using an EAL, even in applications where it is not mandated by law. You position yourself as a leader and an innovator by using an EAL.
Yeah. So thanks, Larry. Again, the target here is, as this slide kind of shows, we're looking to be a provider of these environmentally acceptable lubricants and water-based hydraulic technologies for subsea applications as well as topside applications, and be able to not compromise any of the equipment performance and have a greener technology going forward. So again, we appreciate the time today to discuss some of this technology and see if there are some opportunities or at least some questions and interest about the technology in the LNG world, if you will. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Larry. Thank you, Scott, for your presentation. We have a few questions for you. We have one from Brian Delamer. The question is, for topsides, are you looking at lubricants for prime movers like CAT, Cummins, Solar Gas Turbines, etc.?
Yes, we are. We don't do cylinder oils, if you will, but we do the hydraulics and the gear oils in these kind of systems.
Okay. Thank you. Scott, you wanted to add something?
No, I was just going to say, yeah, we'd definitely be interested in those. Again, the advantages are if you do have any kind of leaks, the environmental aspect of it is greatly minimized with this technology.
Great. So the person that asked Brian, he says that I will contact you. Thanks. Working in Hawaii, that's important.
Absolutely.
Okay, we need to go there. Check it out.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So wait for a message from his side. I have a few questions as well. What makes RSC Bio EALs better than other EALs when it comes to water ingress?
Well,
take that one, Larry?
Yeah. A couple things. The HEPR technology we're using for marine applications is a very water rejecting product. It separates much more rapidly than competing EALs based on synthetic esters, for instance. I mentioned that esters are a bit hydrophilic, meaning that they will absorb more water than would an HEPR type system. So by absorbing less water and separating more quickly, oil water separator systems work more efficiently, and there is less opportunity for oxidation and hydrolysis that way.
Okay, and one last question. What applications do you see with your products in the LNG industry?
Let me take a stab at that one, Larry. So I think a perfect example with the partnership between RSC and McDermott, a perfect example of this might be, say, an FLNG, which is a floating liquid natural gas and production facility. So they would actually be producing gas off the wells offshore while bringing it up topside, and then doing the LNG process, which is boiling it and transferring it to the LNG tankers afterwards. So we would be involved in the subsea aspect of it, where you are operating valve subsea, safety valve subsea, kind of the lifeblood of the subsea system, more or less. And then once we get to the topside world, we would look at the RSC biosolutions products in things such as cranes, launch and recovery systems for the subsea robotic systems, winches, wire rope greases, things like that. And then even really, if you kind of look at the offloading vessels, which is a transport vessel, the LNG tankers, if you will, they're going to probably have stern tubes in them, so they're going to be looking at utilizing that technology that RC has there to keep the water ingress out of those systems. The separation of the water and the seawater or the oil and the seawater is very important, because it can really wreak havoc on those systems. But yeah, that would be a perfect example for me. Now, whether that exists or not, that's hopefully what we can find out some information today.
Yeah.
Okay.
That and positioning thrusters would be another real application for the RSC bio products.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if you don't have anything to add to that, I want to thank you very much for your amazing presentation. Keep an eye for a message from Brian. And thank you once more.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you again for the opportunity, guys.
We
Yes,
appreciate
of
it.
course.
Thank you.
Our online American LNG Forum. Many of you spent recent time overcoming new challenges to keep your organizations operational and benefiting your community. We would like to thank each and every one of you for finding the time for self-development and sharing your expertise with others. We hope that information you have heard today will benefit your companies and you personally. In addition, the world is slowly coming back to normal, and we at ALJ are ready to get back out there and provide you with the best content and best networking opportunities. The second edition of our American LNG Forum will be coming back to Houston on 9th and 10th of February 2021, and will take place in the beautiful Marriott Marquis Houston Hotel. We can't wait to meet you there, listen to the presentations, panel discussions, and later discuss them during our lengthy networking breaks. Once again, thank you for all the viewers, speakers, and sponsors for making this possible. We hope to meet you again soon. Have a good one.